I'm going to take a look at Betrayal at the House on the Hill. This is the original version, I guess. Wizards of the Coast has put out another version, and there's been a couple of re-implementations. This is all I'm familiar with, so we'll go with this. Let me talk a little bit about the components, then we'll jump in to rules discussion, and then I'll get to playing it, I hope, fairly easily. I've got other addictions taking place right now. But let me, I guess, jump in first as to my personal history with this, which is fairly recent. In fact, I just picked it up. The first I heard of it was actually on Board Game Geek, and I've been interested in it for a while because I thought it was something my wife and I could enjoy. Unfortunately, it says 3 to 6 players, and usually I can figure out ways of doing things, and I've got a way to do this in 2, which works pretty well. But I wasn't ever really willing to put down a decent amount of cash when you include shipping and everything. And it was always selling for a little bit more when I was first really kind of looking, keeping an eye out on auctions and all that, and buying far too many games. And then I saw it at my local, we have sort of flea markets at the game store. And, well, it was fairly cheap and no shipping. So I was like, along with a bunch of other fairly cheap no shipping games, picked them up and hauled them home. And pretty happy with the hauls as a whole. Although I haven't played most of the games yet. This one's gotten a good deal of play. For the components, you've got some tiles that are going to represent the building. Kind of like in Arkham Horror or something, except here they're not. It's not something that is sort of preset. You explore, and they're drawn off the top of here. And these guys have which floor they're off of. You don't have to worry too much. It's one big stack, and there's some randomization in it. You have some little minis. These came all painted and everything already. Cute. I don't know if they normally do, or if the person I bought them from painted them. You have some weird little dice. They just run from 0 to 2. I think equal distribution, I'm not sure. And this is your time tracker. You might have to use this. Some little character representations. These aren't very good. The slides for the numbers often aren't nicely positioned. Ideally, I think I'd throw some cubes or something. When my wife and I play, we play with these little things. I may have to think about this in terms of whether or not I want to do something a little different in order to make solo play a little easier, because, well, solo play with the camera, because moving these around is going to be kind of a bitch with one hand. You have 3 decks of cards, event cards, which are just sort of random shit that happens, and most of it not terribly good. Those can be triggered by certain of the rooms. They'll have this symbol on it. They'll have, many of the rooms will have a symbol of a card on it, and we'll go into that. But when you enter the room, you pretty much stop and you draw that. Well, when you first discover a room with that, you've entered the room and you draw the card for it. From then on, the card no longer exists. And, well, the room no longer triggers a card. You have items, which are all good stuff. I don't know about the glare there. It looked like it was nasty. For the most part. Some of it's kind of iffy. And then you have omens, which are kind of an interesting thing. They're what drive the story. So the characters go in, they explore a building, and when a certain number of omens comes up, somewhat randomly in terms of what that certain number is, then the main game starts, where one of the player characters is a traitor, and the rest are out to finish him off. And he's got some kind of the one character has some kind of association for the house. Oh, speaking of the characters, so these all match with one of the minis, and they each have 2 different versions of the character. They have starting values in green on them, which are pretty much the main thing that you're going to be dealing with. They do have some little information on them, I think, somewhere as to what they like and what they don't. I don't remember where that is. Around the side. They have the age, height, weight, hobbies that can add to some kind of role-playing thing. Looking for some drugs. Medicine. And a birthday. The birthday is going to be important for determining who goes first. That's going to be based on the birthday of the character in relation to the day you're actually playing. The room tiles, there are some special ones in here. A lot of them are just devoted to, hey, they have some doors and stuff like that. And traveling through a door is, well, that's the way you travel. Okay, let's take a look at the actual rules, which aren't too bad. You can tell ages 10 and up. So what's kind of cool about this is that each scenario is different, and it's not in kind of a pre-programmed sort of way. You wander into the building and then you start experiencing, you find stuff, and then you're randomly assigned a scenario based on the omen card that triggers the weirdness. And that there's a whole set of charts that determine what's going on. Okay, for the actual game, on your turn you're allowed to move, and you have a movement rate, which is based on your speed. If you enter a new room, you can discover it. It says only one. I have allowed more than one. I'm not sure. I don't see a limit. Yeah, you can keep moving as long as you don't trigger a card. You can attempt a single die roll, and you can use items or omen cards. And once things go bad, you can attack your enemies in various ways. Movement is fairly simple. It just costs you one movement to generally move from one space to another. There's an exception to, well, there's some exceptions to this, but there's one that's kind of standard, which is if you have enemies in the room, you have to pay one movement point per enemy to get away from them and exit the room. So you have to have additional movement points, and you could end up locked in a room because of that. When you enter a room that has one of these symbols, when you first discover a room that has one of these symbols, you draw a card of that proper type, and you read it and take its effect. The omens have some special effects, which can cause the haunt. There are a number of special rooms that have their own special effects. We'll see them as they happen, but in particular, you don't know how to get down to the basement at this point. There is the grand staircase that gets you up to the second floor. There's exits that go outside, and there's distinguishing between some of these aspects. And there's some really weird rooms, like a mystic elevator that'll take you to random other places in the house that haven't been explored. Sometimes you'll have to make a die roll, and what you're trying to do is get higher or lower than a certain value. You roll a certain number of dice, often based on your stat, and that's gonna, you add them up, and that's gonna give you the value that you're looking for. Once per turn, you can attack an opponent in the same room. You can do this before or after movement, once the haunt happens. In general, you choose, you're forced into physical combat, where you'll be using your might and rolling that many dice against the other player or monster or whatever's might. And if one of you gets more than the other, you do physical damage to the person or character that had less. And you do an amount equal to the difference. So if, for example, I rolled my 3 dice and got 3, and the defending creature only rolled a 1, then I would do 2 points of damage. That damage for player characters gets distributed between the physical aspects, might and speed, and you can take the damage on either, and it reduces your value. If you have healing effects or whatever, they get you up to your starting value. You can go above those values, though, through items. It is possible that some characters will be able to do attacks that are not physical, in which case they're doing mental damage that affects sanity and knowledge. If any of your values drop to 0 once the haunt begins, the character is dead. And that might have some effect based on the haunt. It may also just mean they're dead. And that'll be spelled out in the particulars of the haunt. Some items will allow you to make distance attacks. You can also sometimes make a physical attack, and if you do 2 or more points of damage, you can steal an item instead of doing the damage. That can be a big help sometimes. Sometimes an item is vital to the play of the game. This looks like an actual stain. It's not. It's just one of those things that confuse me. All right. Whenever you pick an omen card, you roll 6 dice. And if you get less than the number of omens that have been drawn in total by the player characters, the haunt begins. What happens then is that you look in one of these books and you look up the room that the character found the omen in, and that's a limited list of rooms. Those are the only ones that have omens. You look at the particular omen they pulled, and you'll get a number, and that's the number of the haunt that you're facing. You'll also look up that number over here and see who gets picked as the bad guy for that scenario. And from that point on, everybody knows who the bad guy is, and they're all out to stop him somehow. That's specified in the haunt itself, and the bad guy is out to do something that may or may not involve killing characters, and likewise the good characters may or may not be out to kill the bad character. Or we're never always sure who's bad and good, are we? The traitor character. The haunt is going to give you all kind of instructions, some of which break the normal game rules, and some of which just append to them. Sometimes there's a little bit of interpretation involved in this. The traitor's tome indicates the information that the traitor has about the haunt, and they'll look up and they'll have a name of the particular haunt and what they have to do immediately, what they kind of know about it, and how they win. And likewise, the non-traitor players also look up a haunt, see what what they think they have to do. Again, you may not have all the information that you need to be able to be sure how you win the game from just these. Usually, I think you do know how you win, but you don't necessarily. You certainly don't know how the other player wins, although you might have clues towards that. Once you enter the haunt, you start with the person to the left of the haunt of the traitor player. No matter who actually, started the haunt or whatever, you don't necessarily get the same number of turns at this point. And then each of the heroes gets a turn in which they get to do their things. Then the traitor gets a turn in which they get to do things. Now, the traitor might have monsters on their side, and they might have some special abilities. They have some special abilities that just come with being them, which is they can control certain rooms and they don't have problems with them. They can ignore event cards if they don't like to, but if they do choose to take the event in play, they take all of its effects. And then after they do their own turn, any monsters that they have associated with them, they can move as well. Now, it's also possible that there's weird things that the characters have associated with them that are monsterish, sort of. Well, I'll talk about them. The monsters work a little differently. They don't just move their speed. They roll dice equal to their speed, and that's how many spaces they're allowed to move. So they can move faster or slower than usual. They can't be killed. If they take any damage, they're stunned and knocked over, and they miss a turn. Monsters can only attack once per turn. They're able to ignore a lot of the nasty stuff, just like the traitor is. They can't go find new rooms on their own. They can't carry items unless it says they can. The victory conditions are noted in the little book. Something I didn't mention was all these counters here. We have different kind of counters. I don't know if there's a manifest of what the different types are. I think there is. It's hard to find. Let's take a look. We have square things. These are going to be associated with a given room, and they stay on the board to tell you what's up with that. These triangles are some sort of effect, maybe that you have to take when you enter the room. This, I think, is an item. Some of these stick around. These are your monsters. We haven't played through anywhere near all the scenarios, nor had the person before us. And we have some specific nasties here as well that are a little larger, and I don't know what the point for them is. Playing in 2. Let's go over what I do for that. There are no rules for that in this. Maybe some of the later versions came up with them. But it seemed like perfect in terms of the genre, the mood, and everything for my wife and I to do. So, and since I bought it for that purpose, what I did was we each take 2 characters. And when the traitor is revealed, you play them as normal. No real reason for them to be working together before the hunt starts, but they can. Your own characters can operate and help each other to whatever extent you like. But there's only 1 traitor in the game and 3 non-traitors, so you can't have the traitor player keep playing the non-traitors. So what happens is when somebody picks a traitor, when somebody ends up as the traitor with one of their 2 characters, they give the other character to the other player. This is kind of nice because it means you still want to bonus up your characters just about the same as you would normally. Whichever side you're playing, if you're the traitor, if you end up drawing the traitor, you know that one of your 2 characters is going to be the traitor in that case. So however strong you've made your characters, the traitor character is going to be based on however strong you made them. Now, you may end up in the position where you made one of your characters strong and they end up not being the traitor, and that kind of sucks if your other character is the traitor, but that's life. On the other hand, the person who has the non-traitor, well, they have a real interest in getting both of their characters as strong as possible. So just in general, you want to be collecting good things, do things that work for your character until the haunt begins. Once the haunt begins, one of the characters gets handed off. So far we've played it, I think, 3 times. I've got recorded 3 times. It may be more than that, and it's worked pretty damn well, actually. What I'll be doing in my playthrough is just, I guess, 4 characters. I could use 6. But I don't want to make it too complex. I'll take 4 characters, I'll draw them kind of at random out of the set, and I'll just, you know, play it as though each player is their own. This is going to be a little iffy solo because the players will know the victory conditions that they have, but I've handled things with hidden information, you know, before, so that's not really too big a deal. This is more of a thematic and mood-based game than it is really, and silliness too, because funny things happen, than it is really something where you're very, very focused on that, you know, on that hidden information, on bluffing or anything like that. There's some aspect of it, but there's usually not a whole hell of a lot, especially since it's sort of a blind bluff. I mean, if you're trying to bluff your opponent, you don't know what they actually know, so they may not fall for it at all. But the biggie is they don't necessarily know how you're trying to win the game, and you don't know how they're trying to win the game, and that's usually the scenario conditions do put you into conflict in that sense, but it's not absolutely clear which things you have to protect against the most. All right, let's send this up, and I'll get started after dinner, and maybe after my addiction passes, if it has to go that long.